My stepmother thought she was clever. She thought while I was drowning in grief over my father's death, I wouldn't notice the digital trail she left behind. She used my dying father's iPad at 3:45 in the morning to forge his signature and steal my $200,000 inheritance. She was counting on my grief to keep me sloppy. What she didn't count on was my career. My job is in IT security, auditing the digital vaults of international banks. She didn't know that every digital signature, every tap on a screen, leaves a permanent, undeniable trail, a fingerprint made of data. I'm going to show you the one piece of evidence she left behind, the one log file that would unravel everything and send her to prison. Before the cancer, before Linda, my dad was a force of nature. He was the kind of guy who could build a deck in a single weekend and then spend the next day teaching me how to change the oil in my car. He smelled of sawdust and Old Spice, and he had this booming laugh that could fill a house, a sound I can still hear if I close my eyes tight enough. Our bond was built in the garage, over greasy engine parts and half-finished projects. When my mom passed away, he and I became an unbreakable team. He was a man of his word. In 2020, long before he got sick, he sat me down at his kitchen table and slid a thick Horizon life insurance folder across the pine wood. "This is for you, kid," he said, his voice firm. 200,000. It's not a fortune, but it's a start. It'll wipe out those student loans and give you a clean slate. I was 28, still shackled by $47,000 in college debt, and his promise felt like a key to a future I could finally own. I remember the wave of gratitude was so intense, it almost brought me to tears. He just nodded like, "That's what fathers do." He named me the sole beneficiary. It was simple, clean, and documented. A year before that, in 2019, he'd met Linda. She was 20 years his junior, bright and bubbly on the surface. My dad, lonely for the first time in his life, was completely smitten. To me and my younger sister Jenny, she felt off. There was this practiced helplessness to her. She'd hold up her phone with a confused look and say, "Oh, Dave, honey, I just can't figure out these computers. Can you just order the groceries for me?" Or, "This online banking thing is asking for a password. I'm so scared I'll break it." Dad, ever the protector, would happily take her phone, tap in the passwords, and handle her digital life. She'd watch over his shoulder with a sweet smile. I see now she wasn't helpless. She was studying. She was learning his patterns, his passwords, his digital signature. He thought he was being a good husband, but he was just training his own predator. The diagnosis came in March 2022, stage 4 lung cancer. Those words just hung in the sterile air of the doctor's office, a death sentence with an unknown execution date. The man who seemed invincible was suddenly fragile. The decline was brutal and fast. By the summer of 2023, the cancer had spread. The man with the booming laugh could barely whisper. My life became a commute. Every Friday, I'd leave my apartment in Seattle and drive the 4 hours to his house in Tacoma. I quit my weekend bartending gig, the job helping me chip away at my loans, because he was more important. I spent my weekends sleeping on their living room couch, learning to cook the soft meals he could tolerate, and becoming an expert at his medication schedule. I sat with him through 17 chemo sessions, each one worse than the last. While I was measuring out morphine and changing bedpans, Linda was always running errands. She'd disappear for hours and return with shopping bags and a breezy, "Oh, it was just crazy out there." In a moment of clarity on August 12th, 2023, my dad called his lawyer. He knew his time was short. With a notary and his trusted nurse and neighbor as witnesses, he updated his last will and testament. He was weak, but his voice was clear. The house, his savings, and the life insurance policy. Everything was to be split between me and Jenny. He made a point to look at the notary and say, "My son is the beneficiary on my Horizon policy. I want that to be ironclad." Linda was in the other room, loudly washing dishes, the clatter of pots and pans a thin veil for her fury. She knew she had been written out. And that's when she must have decided to write herself back in. The end came 15 days later. On August 27th, my dad coded. His lungs gave out. The paramedics got his heart started again, but he wasn't there anymore. At the hospital, the doctors were blunt. Catastrophic brain damage from the lack of oxygen. There was no coming back. To prevent any more suffering, they placed him in a medically induced coma. I have the hospital chart, and it's seared into my memory. At 2:17 a.m., the order was given. At 2:20 a.m., the propofol drip started. From that moment on, his brain activity was flat. He was alive only by the grace of machines. For all legal and practical purposes, he was gone. I stayed by his bedside, holding his cold, unresponsive hand. Linda showed up hours later, putting on a grand performance of the distraught wife for the nurses, dabbing at her dry eyes. I was too numb to even be angry. My world had shrunk to the beep of the heart monitor. 2 days later, in the dead of night, while my father lay motionless, my stepmother committed the ultimate betrayal. At exactly 3:45 a.m. on Tuesday, August 29th, she picked up my father's iPad. She went to the Horizon life insurance portal, entered his username and password, and initiated a beneficiary change request through DocuSign. She changed the sole beneficiary from me to herself. She clicked the box certifying she had the authority to do so, claiming she was acting as his power of attorney. Then she forged his signature, a near pixel-perfect copy she had watched him use countless times. She clicked finish. The whole thing took less than 5 minutes. My father's final wish for me, undone with a few taps on a screen. I didn't find out for weeks. I was consumed with funeral arrangements and emptying the house that was once so full of his presence. Jenny and I were sorting through his records when the mail came. It was a letter from Horizon Life, a confirmation notice. I opened it, expecting condolences. Instead, I read, "We are pleased to confirm the successful payout of policy number 745-8B to the beneficiary, Linda. A direct wire transfer in the amount of $200,000 was completed to the account ending in 4782. The air left my lungs. It was a physical blow. $200,000. Gone. Wired to her. Meanwhile, my student loan payment was late. I had over $1,000 in late fees, and the bank was calling about repossessing my car. And she had my father's money. My hands were shaking, but I dialed her number. She answered, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Hello?" "Linda, it's me," I said. "What the hell is this letter from Horizon Life? Why was the money paid out to you?" A pause. Then she laughed. Not a nervous laugh, a triumphant one. "Oh, that," she said. "Your father and I had a talk. He wanted to make sure I was secure. He changed it. You and Jenny are getting the house. Isn't that enough?" "The house was willed to me and Jenny," I shot back. "The insurance was separate. He signed that will 2 weeks before the coma. He didn't change anything, Linda." "Well, you must be mistaken," she said, her voice turning cold. "The insurance company seems to think otherwise. The money's in my account. It's done. You should really learn to let things go." She hung up. I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear. Let it go? She had stolen my father's last gift to me. She danced on his grave before he was even in it. She thought her lie was perfect. But in that moment, the grief was replaced by something cold and methodical. The part of me that audits multi-billion-dollar banking systems took over. She made a mistake. She used a computer. And I was going to find it. My stepmother's biggest mistake was underestimating me. Her whole, "I can't work the computer" act was a cover story she started to believe herself. She probably thought using a trusted platform like DocuSign would make the change look official and unchallengeable. She didn't understand that for a transaction this big, DocuSign doesn't just record a signature, it records everything. It creates a bulletproof, non-editable audit trail called a Certificate of Completion, designed to be admissible in court under the Federal e-Sign Act. She had just invited a digital notary to witness her crime. My first call wasn't to a lawyer, but to Horizon Life's fraud department. I explained the situation. My father was in a documented, medically induced coma when the change was made. The rep was skeptical, citing privacy, but I was ready. "I am the executor of his estate and the previously named beneficiary," I said firmly. "I am alleging felony financial elder abuse and forgery. The document you have was signed when the signer was medically incapacitated. I need the full DocuSign Certificate of Completion for the beneficiary change made around August 29th. The legal terms worked. After verifying my identity, they agreed to mail it to my lawyer. While I waited, I started my own investigation. I still had the admin password to their home router. I drove back to the house, plugged my laptop in, and pulled the system logs for all of August. I cross-referenced the router's activity with the time of my father's coma. I saw normal traffic, Netflix, Facebook, and then a spike. At 3:45 a.m. on August 29th, a clear connection was made to DocuSign's servers. The log gave me an internal IP address, 192.168.1.45. I then checked the router's DHCP table, which lists all connected devices. Each device has a unique serial number called a MAC address. And there it was. The IP address from 3:45 a.m. was assigned to a device with a MAC address registered to Apple Inc., with the device name Linda's iPad. I took a screenshot. My heart was pounding. This was the first thread. She didn't just do it from their house. She did it on her iPad. A week later, the DocuSign certificate arrived. I spread the pages on my lawyer's conference table. It was a complete narrative of the crime. It showed the document was created from Linda's email, viewed at 3:43 a.m., and then the signature. Timestamp: August 29th, 2023, 3:45:12 a.m., PDTT. Signer IP address: a public IP I traced back to their home internet provider in Tacoma. Geolocation: Tacoma, Washington. The document was an incontrovertible timeline. 2 days after my father entered a coma, someone in his house used his internet to forge his name and divert $200,000. My router logs proved it was her iPad. I wasn't done. I filed a request for my father's complete medical chart, citing my status as executor. The records were a second-by-second account of his body shutting down. The propofol administration log showed a continuous, uninterrupted drip from 2:20 a.m. on August 27th until his death. Nursing notes stated, "Patient unresponsive" on every single check. Brain scans confirmed zero cortical activity. I now had two parallel timelines destined to collide. Linda's digital timeline, showing her active and forging a signature, and my father's medical timeline, showing him completely incapacitated. It was impossible for him to have signed that document. Impossible. I printed everything, put it in a thick binder, and 3-hole punched it. This was my weapon. The next day, I sat with a pro bono lawyer specializing in elder fraud. As I walked him through the binder, his expression shifted from sympathy to anger. When I showed him the side-by-side comparison of the DocuSign timestamp and the propofol log, he just shook his head and said, "She's done." He explained this wasn't just a civil dispute. It was a series of felonies. In Washington, theft over $5,000 is theft in the first degree, a Class B felony. Add that the victim was a vulnerable adult, and you get charges of financial elder exploitation. On October 15th, we filed a civil suit to freeze her accounts. We attached my affidavit and the core exhibits, the DocuSign certificate, the hospital records, and the network log analysis. We turned the whole binder over to the county prosecutor. Linda's reaction was pure arrogance. She hired a high-priced lawyer, probably with a retainer paid for my inheritance. Then, she did something so audacious it sealed her fate. On October 20th, she launched a GoFundMe. The title? Help a Grieving Widow Fight Greedy Stepkids. She painted herself as a heartbroken wife left penniless, claiming we were trying to kick her out of her home. It was sickening. And people fell for it, donating over $8,400. I didn't get angry. I got busy. I took screenshots of every donation and every comment. It was more evidence of her deception. The first civil hearing was December 10th, 2023. Linda walked in clutching a tissue. My lawyer laid out the facts. "Your Honor," he began, "Mr. David Miller entered a medically induced coma at 2:20 a.m. on August 27th. The hospital records confirm he was non-responsive with no brain activity." He held up the DocuSign certificate. The beneficiary change, diverting a $200,000 policy to the defendant, was executed at 3:45 a.m. on August 29th, over 48 hours after he was in the coma. The judge looked at Linda's lawyer. "Counselor, can you explain this?" Her lawyer stammered. Your Honor, it's our position that Mr. Miller authorized this change at an earlier date, and she was simply executing his wishes." The judge wasn't having it. She was executing them by forging his signature in the middle of the night while he was on life support? The DocuSign log shows the exact time. The hospital chart shows it was medically impossible. This isn't a gray area, counselor. That was the moment her mask shattered. Her face went pale, then red. The judge immediately granted our motion, freezing Linda's accounts and placing the $200,000 in a trust. The criminal case moved swiftly. Police seized her electronics, including the iPad. The forensic analysis found her browser search history from the week before the coma. How to change life insurance beneficiary. Is DocuSign legally binding? And the most damning, how to backdate DocuSign's signature. Faced with irrefutable evidence, she folded. On February 14th, 2024, Valentine's Day of all things, Linda pled guilty to theft in the first degree and financial elder exploitation. The judge sentenced her to 5 years in state prison, plus restitution and a $50,000 fine. The $200,000 was released back to my sister and me on January 6th, 2024. Watching her get led out of the courtroom in handcuffs wasn't elating. It was just a quiet, hollow sense of justice. She gambled everything on a lie and lost to a single log file. She bet that nobody would look closer, that her deception was good enough. And she was wrong. If you've ever dealt with a betrayal from someone you were supposed to trust, share your story in the comments. Reading them helps us all feel a little less alone. Subscribe for more stories where the truth, eventually, comes out. The first thing I did with the money was pay off my student loans. Hitting submit on that final $47,000 payment felt like my dad was there, clapping me on the shoulder, the clean slate he wanted for me. Jenny and I used the rest to pay his remaining medical bills, $12,000 that Linda had ignored, and to give him a proper memorial. We sold the house. It held too many ghosts. Linda is now inmate number 892471 at the Washington Corrections Center for Women. Her GoFundMe was taken down for fraud. I've never visited her. I have nothing to say. But I did send her one letter. Inside was just a printout of the DocuSign certificate, with the timestamp and her IP address circled in red. At the bottom, I wrote a single sentence. Thought you couldn't work a computer? My father believed in honesty and a person's word. In the end, it was the digital word that honored his memory. She thought technology was a tool to steal in the dark. But it's not. It's a ledger. It's a witness that never sleeps and never forgets. She thought she was committing the perfect crime, but all she did was create the perfect evidence.